Hello, I'm Soycat, and what does the national speed limit have in common with the minimum wage? The simple answer to that question seems to be that every country picks one, they pick a slightly different one that they insist they've done exactly right and every other country is wrong. They all seem to be arbitrary, and then for some reason, some countries get away with not having one. As you can see, some countries, notably Sweden, Finland, Denmark, even Italy and Egypt, do not have national minimum wages, and some countries, the Isle of Man and Germany being the biggest examples, do not have a national speed limit. You can go as fast as you like in Germany, which is insane. One of the most basic duties for a country is to legislate how people make a living, or, I guess, how they make a killing, because people kill each other when they drive. And so how is it that some countries just don't pick a limit for these sorts of things? That seems insane, and let's talk about why maybe it is and / or isn't in today's video, because I recently learned to drive, and so I've been really interested by the differences in driving as you go across borders, not just within states of, like, say, the US or Canada, or provinces in Canada. If I don't say that, someone goes, oh, technically they're provinces, Toycat. State is a subdivision of a country. I'm glad to help you out there. But also, let's talk about the fact that, as you can see, across Europe even, when you're driving from country to country, the speed limit, as well as many other rules, change as you go across it. For example, did you know you have to pay, it's something like €8 just to drive on the motorway, the highways in the Czech Republic, but you don't need to do so when driving in, say, Austria. Wow, that's a weird difference, isn't it? How do these sorts of things add up? Let's talk about motorways and the differences and all the fun things, and how exactly we end up with a map that is so wildly different, because there's so many fun exceptions in this. But first, let's talk about motorways, because did you know not every country has a motorway? Even just within Europe, which is a very densely populated area, you can see how not only does Moldova and not only does Montenegro not have motorways, that is a highway with controlled access on and off, but also Latvia. Latvia's, and also I should mention Monaco doesn't have a motorway, either does Andorra or the Vatican City. As funny as it is to imagine a motorway going through the Vatican City, but Latvia doesn't have one. What's the deal with that, huh? And the answer is, yeah, not every country builds a motorway. This is Europe, which is maybe the best, but within Europe, by the way, look at this. Belarus and Ukraine both built their first motorway in the 2010s. So their motorway is like 10 years or newer, which is kind of crazy, really, when you're thinking about it. But yeah, if you go to this fun Wikipedia page, you can see the length of the road network in a country, which just tells you how much, like, place to go from place to place. But then there's controlled access, which is the way of defining a highway, a freeway, a motorway, an expressway, whatever they're called. Every country gives it a slightly different term, but there's a way of defining what one of those is. You can only merge on in controlled ways. There's no intersections and roundabouts and crazy stuff like that. And so this is what a motorway is generally considered to be. Who's at the top of this? Funnily enough, it's China, then it's the United States, then the EU as a whole, and then it's a huge drop-off, and the EU as a whole is kind of cheating, then it's a huge drop-off to Mexico, Canada, and then Spain, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And funnily enough, once you drop down below the top 10 or so, very few countries have a major expressway network, because I guess they don't have such a large thing like that. Because funnily enough, before reading this, I would have assumed the UK has one of the smaller motorway networks, because I looked into it. I was like, what's the deal with that? Look at the UK's road network. It doesn't cover Wales at all, besides that little section in the south. It gets to the cities in Scotland and gives up. Like, I didn't realize how limited the motorway network is until I went to America, where, the United States, I should clarify, where, man, look at this. It's the interstate system visualized as a metro network. You start to realize, like, whoa, you can really, like, cross the country in so many different ways. It's like a beautiful realization of the level of transport infrastructure, which of course they put into their favorite form, the car. But still, I would have assumed before this that the UK was lower down, because it doesn't feel like there are that many in the UK. But apparently we're very high up, along with France and Germany. And while we're talking about France and Germany, because again, it becomes very clear that there's really two countries that are vying for, like, the big road infrastructure, and that's the US and China. But while we're looking into that, I should mention that China, despite having the most expressways in the world, their national trunk highway system only began in 1984. And that's kind of crazy to me that, like, this whole network has been built since then. Just a reminder of, like, how fast China has come from where they were to where they are now. I mean, a lot of people assume it's like, well, it's been a long time coming, and like, sort of, but a lot of other countries that were going to become superpowers didn't. Also, here's a fun one. The speed limit in China is 120 kilometers an hour. That's 75 miles per hour. The damn commies are going faster than Wait, one second. Let me confirm because technically speaking, China is a communist country on a technicality. The commies are going faster than, as you can see, a healthy portion of Europe. Actually, looking at this map, the UK has a lower speed limit than not only Ireland, but also most of mainland Europe. That's funny. But as you can see, the same speed limit is applied in most of the eastern and western US, and therefore, communism faster than capitalism. We've proven it with maths right here. Sorry to say, guess I'm pulling out my hammer and sickle right now. But yeah, with that said, ignoring my terrible communism joke that's only going to offend people, let me know your thoughts on communism versus capitalism down below. Which of those is a better system? Can you give me like a run through, maybe like a 6-paragraph rant about your feelings on that? Thank you, I'd appreciate that. So while you do that, let me tell you the fact that China doesn't just have a max speed limit, it has a minimum speed limit, 60 kilometers an hour. But if you're in overtaking lanes, it's 110, which makes sense. Why are you in the overtaking lane going 10 slower than the speed limit anyway? And so yeah, with that said, another weird thing is until 2004, new drivers, those with a Chinese driver's license for less than a year, weren't allowed on expressways, which is kind of interesting to me, the idea that like these expressways right here are the most dangerous part of driving. This is a common myth around most of the world. In fact, if you look at so here's the map of countries by speed limit. If we ignore Germany, because we're going to come to Germany and their no speed limit rule, because it's got a big asterisk on it. But if you look at countries and their speed limits, you can see how, but with the exception of like the Middle East and maybe Poland. I think Poland's in light purple too. Actually, yeah, it's only Oman at 100 miles per hour speed limit, 160 kilometers, because only a few countries use miles. And sadly, I live in one of them. Just realized now that most people watching this probably, whatever. So with the exception of like the Middle East, Poland, and Bulgaria, the only purple country, or purple place, is Texas over here. And I looked into the Texas thing because I was very curious, and as it turns out, Texas as a whole has an 80 mile per hour speed limit. I didn't know that could be done by the state. I've Googled it before, and if you Google what the speed limit is in the US, it lies to you and it says it's 70 nationwide, and like most of the population lives in a 70 or a 65, but still, it's technically a lie, and I'm very sad about how Google lied to me when I Googled that years ago. Anyway, but if you look into Texas in particular, you'll find that the speed limit there is generally 80, and the only time it's 85 is when they built a relief road between Austin and Seguin. I don't know what Seguin is or why it's a town of, 25,000 people connecting to a pretty big city, but like not the biggest one in Texas. It's like the 4th biggest. The state capital to Seguin, I like to believe that's one of the, because if it's the capital, there's some people, the legislators live there. They're like, well, I need to get to my home. And so they built a road which goes at 85 miles per hour, which is Texas Expressway 130 or whatever it's called. Does it have a name? It's just Texas Highway 130. And so if you actually look at this is the one highway in the United States where you can go 85 miles per hour. 130 kilometers, was it? 140 kilometers now. The one place in America where you can do that is right here. As you can see, there's the sign just to confirm it is 85. But if you look at the road, there's nothing special about it. The speed limit is raised here, not because they decided it's so safe, like we've made this highway 5 miles per hour safer than other ones. It was decided for political reasons like, oh, yeah, there's too much traffic on the highway that we're trying to save time from, and so if we make this one faster, we can take the traffic off there, and we can solve our state problem, or whatever it is. I don't know if they did solve the state problem. I haven't looked into it further. What I can say, though, is look at this road. It looks remarkably average. It looks even less safe than average, right? Like, I would say that this is just the most generic, boring highway. You wouldn't assume if there was one road in the US, the safest one to have a speed limit that is higher than the rest, it'd be this one. But this is it, Texas 130, because ultimately, if you look at the speed limits around the world, and you see how it varies even from neighboring countries with similar infrastructures, you realize that it basically is an arbitrary decision, that at some point in time, someone says, we need a speed limit for our fastest roads, what should it be? And depending on the circumstances at the time when they chose that limit, they've kind of stuck with it since. In the UK, I believe it was based on the most popular car in the UK, I think it's a Ford Anglia at the time, the top speed it had was 70. So if you go faster than 70, then most people would be in danger because they wouldn't be able to overtake and blah, 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 blah. And so you set the speed limit, and then retroactively, because it's for safety, you say, yeah, 70 is safe, 75 makes you a madman. 85 miles per hour in Texas? Those people must be dying all the time. I did look into it, and as it turns out, Texas is actually the most dangerous state for car crashes. There were 3,305 fatal car crashes in 2022. I'm assuming that's going to be the year to date. Based on that. But as you can see, they have the highest number of car crashes, which means that actually having that speed limit be 5 or 15 miles per hour, depending on how you want to see it, higher than the rest of the country, is actually incredibly dangerous. Texas, they set their speed limit 10 miles per hour faster so they could get places faster, and they killed people in the process, which is really messed up and irresponsible until you realize that, wait a minute, we forgot to go per capita, didn't we? And if you go per capita, you realize that the safest place, the most dangerous place is South Carolina. The safest is Massachusetts, and again, if you scroll down, you'll see that actually Texas, with the fastest speed limit in the country, is right here in the middle, actually, funnily enough. And there's a lot of countries, like Alaska, where you can see their speed limit is 65, lower than the national average, and yet in spite of that, more Alaskans die, because as it turns out, the contributing factor to whether you die is generally not the largest thing, speed limit, right? The speed you are going can be a large factor. The various other safety things that you go through, the safety of your vehicles, the blah, 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 blah. But speed is just one of those factors. In the same way, if you don't mind this little segue into the other point, a lot of people assume that the minimum wage is just like, well, that's the amount you should be paying a person at the minimum. And so if you have a low minimum wage, then people starve. I mean, in most of the US, there is just the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour of work. And people are like, wow, that is too little to live on. Because as we all know, every single person who lives in those places must be paid exact minimum wage. And there is a funny effect in this, where as countries raise their minimum wage, more and more people do end up on it. I mean, if you take the UK, for example, in the last decade or so, we didn't have a minimum wage until the 2000s or late 90s. In the last 25 years, we picked up a minimum wage, and in the last 10 years, we doubled it. In my lifetime, like an hour of work being worth like, just under £5 has now become an hour of work is worth about £9. And this doesn't affect me. So I don't have a dog in this race, just to clarify. But if you look at the over time as it has raised, most of the gradual raises took a few more people into minimum wage. But in the last decade, where we've substantially increased the minimum wage, you can see how now instead of having about 0.7 million people on the minimum, we have about 3 million people. And so this means a lot of people who previously were earning just above minimum wage by £1 or £2 or £3 are now also on the minimum wage, which means if you think about it in a way, there's been this effect of like bringing the bottom closer together, which is great for the people who were previously on the minimum. They've made a huge increase in their earnings, but not so great for the people who already were up here and now have been brought down to the level. There's an interesting thing in that, right? Like the minimum wage is not the wage you will pay someone, it's just the very minimum that you can do. And in the same way, the speed limit is not the maximum speed. It's not the speed that you will go, the speed that they're recommending that you go. It's the maximum that you should go. There are all sorts of people who are being paid below the minimum wage around the world, and there are all sorts of people who are going above the speed limit. In fact, I would say, based on driving, especially in the US and the UK, the speed limit is not a limit in the slightest. It is a advisory with legal consequences for going too far around it. That's how I would describe it. Maybe in your country it's different. Let me know your experiences in the comments down below, right after that communism capitalism debate. But the speed limit is just a maximum that you probably should be going, right? That's like it's an advisory that you then have some legal enforce if you go too far past. But again, within like 5 to 10, I think 10% is the rough rule most people use. And so, but even past that, it's like there's nothing stopping you from going 90 in a 70 country. Or again, I'm sorry, I'm using miles per hour, but whatever. We'll be dumb non-metric people today. You can go 90 in a 70. You can go 60 in a 70. If you're not in China, admittedly, if you're in China, you've got many more laws you should worry about than the minimum speed limit. Unless you're in China, there is no minimum, maximum, heavy enforcement, and instead, and even then, I imagine you can speed in China. Instead, it is just kind of this rough guideline, and so really the difference between a state saying 70, or a state saying 80, or a state saying 75, See, you can tell, by the way, the states that are all 80 and 75 are the ones that you just want to get through because no one lives there, whereas the states people live in all go to 70, just saying, weird observation. Yeah, the opposite's true in Canada, though, where their highest speed limits are where the people live, 120 over on the west coast, and their lowest are where no one wants to live, but somehow they end up trapped, which is Quebec over here, and Newfoundland, I'm sorry. But yeah, you can see the interesting thing there. Very, very interesting as we look around this map. Lots of weird, interesting quirks that come from this. But I guess my point is just to say that if you look at all these numbers, it seems a tiny bit arbitrary, but then you might say, no, it's not arbitrary because, as we all know, a slightly lower speed limit is going to lower road deaths, because even though it's not a one-to-one correlation, most of the states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arizona, do have slightly higher speed limits. If we look again, you can see, oh, actually, South Carolina doesn't correlate at all here, does it? But if you look at the safest states, those ones actually do correlate. Probably Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, Rhode Island. If we go back to our graph, you can see Massachusetts, 65. New York, 65. Minnesota, 70, which is, again, the average, if not slightly below. And Rhode Island, I am assuming 65. I wouldn't be able to tell otherwise. Like 65 miles per hour, you'll drive across the state in a few seconds. Like, whatever. You get the point that the safest states actually do correlate with lower speed limits, because by clamping down on people's speeds, you can clamp down on their ability to kill people. And also, that's before we talk about fuel efficiency, right? Did I lose my fuel efficiency graph? Oh, here we go. Have we got it? Here we go. So here is the fuel efficiency. So here's the speed on the bottom axis, and on the left is fuel consumption. Every car gets more fuel efficient and therefore less environmentally harmful, somewhere between about 30 to 100 kilometers an hour. That's, wait, there's a handy little chart here. That's somewhere from like, I don't know, 40 kilometers to like 40 miles to, wait, 20 miles to like 60 miles per hour. Somewhere in that ballpark is where a car is most environmentally safe, and also probably safe in terms of like hitting people, whereas when you go to 70, you hurt the environment a little bit more per mile traveled, and also you hurt people a little bit more statistically, as it turns out. On some level, probably there's a correlation, if not a causation effect there. And so that is the reason people do that. By the way, just as the fun aside, I think we haven't spoken about it yet. Germany has no speed limit. Does everyone just die there all the time? The answer is no. If you look, first of all, the misconceptions that Germany doesn't have no speed limit. There are speed limits on about half. I heard about 2/3 of the Autobahn last time I was there. My German girlfriend learned to drive at some point while we were dating, and so as a result, I heard the fact 2/3. But apparently, driving instructors just lie to you all the time, and it's fine because, like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna not trust the person driving the death vehicle with you? Anyway, so yeah, like as you can see, there is no blanket speed limit, but there is an advisory limit of 130, which when you really get down to it, right? The advisory limit is roughly the same. It's just being more honest. Like, if you are to go more than 70 in the UK, to go more than 85 on that one highway in Texas, are you really gonna get immediately, 86 miles per hour? Prosecution, car taken away, bad things happen to you? No, there's always a grace limit, and then past the grace limit, there's the, will anyone even spot this limit? One of my favorite things is there's this record, it's called the Cannonball Run. The time that it takes to drive from New York to Los Angeles is about 3 days. It's crazy. It used to take, this is really a success of the interstate system, because it used to take like hilariously long times. But New York to LA, coast to coast, right? Northeast to southwest. It takes 41 hours. Actually, really, is it only that long? It takes 41 hours, but people have done it in 23. This is assuming you are going 70 for most of the journey, maybe 80 in these states. But obviously, that means that if people have done this journey in 23 hours, they've gone probably double the speed limit on average, which is kind of nuts when you think about it. Also, it's kind of nuts that it only takes a day and a half of non-stop driving to cross America. Like, all you'd have to do is, like, have 2 drivers and then do, like, what, 20-hour shifts each? Or, like, 10-hour shifts, 2 each? I'm just saying, it could work, right? It could work. I don't know if it's a smart thing. This is the most off-topic video ever, but welcome to the Toy Cat channel. I don't think we have a point ever. Did you want some grand statement here? I guess the grand statement here really is to say that, yeah, speed limits are kind of arbitrary, because even in Germany, where there is no speed limit and cars regularly go 286 miles per hour or whatever it is, I mean, I don't think cars regularly go that fast, but they regularly go faster than any other country around the world. But even though that's true, as you can see, the European Transport Safety Council said that even with the no speed limit, it was the 10th safest road network in Europe. All of these other countries, there we go, with their motorways, if they didn't build the roads as well, or they didn't build the systems, or the people, or the, like the drivers as well, then it doesn't matter about the speed limit. All of those other things come first. However, again, when we come back to fuel efficiency, that's where we have the ultimate debate about, okay, so it's not about safety, it's about fuel. And this is where my grand point and my big question, I guess society's big question comes in, because right now we're basically picking speed limits on two factors: safety and fuel efficiency. Especially in the big metropolitan states pick lower speed limits to make their cities and their big groups of people slightly less polluted in their lungs. But in a world where there's no pollution coming out of a car, and in a world where, let's say, there's a lot more driving aids and safety aids, and the cars are getting safer like they are every year, should you be able to drive on I-5? Should you be able to drive at basically the unlimited speed limit, or at the very least higher speed limits, right? Because all you have to do to connect places faster, like the two big cities in California, you have to drive for 8 hours, I think it is. Like it's 6 hours and 18 minutes. I have bad estimations of how long it takes to drive places. Funny how that works. But it takes 6 hours and 18 minutes to drive between the two big cities in California. And it's like, you know how you can make that 5 hours? Up the speed limit 20%. Want to make it 3 hours? Double the speed limit. And now everyone can get there faster. You can economically connect a place at the cost of maybe lives and at the cost of probably fuel efficiency and therefore the environment. But what if we didn't have to care about those things? What if instead we could solve those problems? This is one of those struggles where actually then you start to question, are we doing a bad thing? Even if we assume that there is no death and there is no pollution thing, are you doing a bad thing anyway? Because, well, you're now going to be disincentivizing, say, trains. You're going to be disincentivizing all the other forms of public transport because a bus still has to go 50. Believe me, as someone who has taken a bus in Germany, where the speed limit might be, 130 or whatever it's actually much lower if you're in a bus. It's 37 miles per hour if you're standing, and it's 100 kilometers an hour if you're not towing a trailer, but you go much slower than surrounding traffic in a bus, and that sucks, right? And so you can make public transport even worse by making the alternatives better. Or could you argue that actually no, you make everything as good as you can for everyone. Making the road network between London and Paris better doesn't replace the Eurostar. Making the road network between, I don't know, New York and Washington, D.C. better isn't going to make people magically stop using those trains, although maybe it is. Maybe everything should be good rather than trying to... Again, I feel as though this is like the pull-push system. Should you be pulling people away from their cars, or should you be pushing them onto public transport? And the answer is, well, if you think that one of those methods is better than the other for people... Wait, what's the speed limit here? I found a sign. What's the speed limit on... Oh, exit 30 miles per hour. By the way, I think those are advisory speed limits, right? You don't have to follow those. Am I wrong? I don't... let me know so I can not break laws next time in your country. But, yeah, in general, there is the very interesting thing that we have to work out, do we want to make the greater good over the individual's choice, or do you slowly nudge people's decisions by making one network better than the other? If you want people to drive more, make speed limits higher that way. Just accept the deaths and the fatalities in the environment. If you want people to drive less, you can lower the speed limits. But is that oh, I've been to this exact place. No way. Okay, this is crazy. I picked on a random highway. I've been to this service station because I remember how weird it looked. I was like, I didn't realize Americans had service stations. I thought you just went down those big, thick roads that have a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, and a McDonald's. And look, it's like an actual building. You go inside, like it's a motorway services in the UK. That's quirky. This is the one time I've been to Maryland. This is the one building I've ever stepped foot in, in your great state. Sorry to say. I mean, maybe it's not such a great state if that's all the places I've been to. Anyway, yeah, this video had a point somewhere in there, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Because it's over now. Goodbye. Oh, wait. Give me money if you want to support bad videos like this one. Patreon.com/toycat. Thank you. Bye.